conference in cost, wildlife viewing opportunities, new market creation, quasi-public goods being marketised and turned into commodities by estates that were well placed to pick up recreational traffic. What about innovation in lowland England, densely populated lowland England, where the forests are full of recreationalists? Well, here, probably the key innovation is a new management agreement, which is currently being developed, as I speak now, between the landowner, who's a large landowner in the private sector, the Duke of Bedford, and many local partnerships. The local state, the county council, and nearby Newtown, Milton Keynes, these are coming together to try and negotiate significant payments to the landowner for the recreational use that's taking place on his land. That'll compensate the landowner for the environmental services provided. But within that area, there's also some really interesting self-organising groups, mountain biking groups, that are organising and developing through a much more endogenous and organic way their use of the forest. Even if it yields no benefit to the landowner, it delivers value. What about the northeast of Scotland? Here, it looks like production forest. It's not terribly exciting for tourists, but you've got the nearby market town of Huntly there rebranding itself as an outdoor activity hub. There's Nordic skiing. This year, there were about 3.5 months of good Nordic skiing through those forests, through a local club, and that generates income and visits and so on. And there are peregrine falcons nesting in the forests with an award-winning, video cam on the nest looking at the birds, and many people flock in to see it. So you've got activity, wildlife being rebranded and packaged and sold. So, what have we got? Okay, 2 key arenas at least for innovation. What I'd call private entrepreneurship, or indeed social entrepreneurship, building on new market opportunities. The example of Go Ape is a franchise in Britain where you've got these high-level walkways, but rather than just being a load of public investment, like it is in Austria, I don't mean this critically, it's actually something that generates income. Lots of, lawyers and lots of industrial, people go there for their away days and they spend a lot of money on these places and they swing from these ropes and they feel better for it, and sometimes they may be more productive when they get back to work, you never know. And then on the other hand, we've got networks and multi-actor partnerships. Leader here is absolutely essential. And the idea is to link multiple actors. So, there are many examples of good practice. Leadership, somebody's already said, is crucially important. That was said in the industrial sector. I concur with that totally. It's not just about organisational leadership, it's about individuals with the capacity to lead and drive things forward. It's also about individual entrepreneurship, not resulting from any coherent strategy, but just bubbles and blips of dynamism that we let happen and work creatively with. It's also about, though, new framework conditions from policy making a difference. We couldn't have RED, we couldn't have carbon trading if we didn't have some framework conditions. It's about networks of common actors in a horizontal way, like tourism operators. It's about good practice in forest owners' organisations that we can see as very, very important in delivering key public goods in some forests. And it's about developing things like new carbon markets. And if we just look at 1 or 2 examples here, there's a nice example in Finland, although this is a North American one, using birch sap as a product. And here is an old product that's been gathered from time immemorial that somebody is turning into a branded identity product on the left. The black grouse example is a very neat example of marketing. I've talked about that already. The Borgatoro mushrooms in the top, mountain biking and forest lodges and forest tourism in Britain. And in the middle, a load of blurb that I don't want you to read, carbon trading. The Vancouver Olympic Games were offset, and that generated something like £3 million worth of carbon credits that were channeled through firms in British Columbia. That's creative use of tourism through forests. So, what are my conclusions? There are some elements of an innovation enabling system in place, but overall I think it's still very fragmentary. It's rooted much more in territorially configured networks, triple helixes, innovation systems, call them what you like. in which the interface between public goods and private sectors is understood and built upon. That is the foundation from which you have to work, not, I believe, a sectoral innovation system. Sometimes that innovation will be endogenous, sometimes it will be formally constructed as a result of the actions of those institutions. Empowerment of local actors and stakeholders in a leader-style partnership can help, but we have to be realistic. The overall level of funding for LEADER is very low, and there are tensions between these potential territorial partnerships and sectoral innovation systems that we have to understand. And in many countries, as our work showed, forestry is not seen as integral to the LEADER programme. The representation is patchy. In some places you had some good examples, but there are many LEADER groups where forestry is simply not on their radar, and that also we need to address. And often, lastly, it's just the entrepreneurial innovator, not the innovation system, that we need to understand. We shouldn't underestimate the creative class. They too can be really important in individualistic, entrepreneurial connection to the forest sector in its widest sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as we can see, there were many examples of good practice during the data collection and a lot of interesting things. For me, it's good how to see non-wood from the trees, and the old forestry dies hard. It's a nice word. So we have time for questions, so please, if someone would like.
Thank you for this interesting review. I would like to ask you, but first maybe also some introduction, and because I share different opinion in Poland than you show, that foresters would be more than happy to have such tools to get additional benefit of these non-productive products. But so far the situation is like this, that foresters in Poland are embarrassed that they are producing wood. So the change happened during the last 15 years, that from wood product oriented in forest production, it is now ecological forestry. And all those, let's say, products, services, are taken as granted. And nobody would like to pay for this. And I wonder your opinion, why it is such a situation, because the concept is not new. I remember already 27 years of working in the Forest Institute, and there are researchers working on this subject, how to evaluate it, the value of protection of soil, protection of water. Nowadays it's additional element CO2. And they elaborated some methods, but I wonder why they cannot be introduced into the practice. Are they not simple enough or too complicated to be introduced, or there is no political willingness? Because something is wrong. And even now, I remember negotiating a new project, what Timothy Hall also mentioned, and this new forest coordinator job, Thorsen, that it's not so easy, I'm afraid, even to expect some innovation in respect of new methods. And it's possible probably to make a value of forests in different parts of Europe, but to come with something new which would be accepted by the forest practice, for example, or politicians, that I'm afraid might be very difficult, because even during even negotiations, the group proposed, for example, using auctions, but the others were against. So I wonder your opinion, why we don't have such through-breaking innovation in this respect, if it's known for so many years?
Thank you.
I think your question is absolutely fair, and I think is a really important one. as you'll probably know, there's been some very large groups at European Union level, or with European Union support, the group looking at TEEB, as it's called, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. It's a very important project. It's been reporting recently, and it's reported in fact, the incredibly high value of any marginal pound, marginal euro spent on biodiversity protection. The science of non-market valuation is moving forwards, but not perhaps moving forwards fast enough, and that makes it rather hard to put a value. It's quite easy to put values on some things, like a ton, the carbon locked up in a ton of wood. We can value, we can measure soil carbon and so on. But when you start measuring landscape values and recreational values, the methods that are being used at the moment are still being refined, and therefore I don't know how much I'm going to pay you with your forest near Poznan and you with your forest near somewhere else, because there will be differences of value that are very important over space, and somebody will feel robbed and somebody will feel benefited. It doesn't mean to say we shouldn't try and refine those methods, and certainly that kind of activity is being, you could see it in one of the FP7 projects that was being promoted there by Tim earlier today. We need a better handle on those values. But if we look at agriculture as a parallel case, we've seen agriculture up to the 1980s totally supported for production. We've seen a growing Pillar 2, and within Pillar 2, I think I'm probably right in saying that the single biggest area of spending at European level, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is Axis 2, which is the agri-environmental expenditures. And if we look at the health check, what we see is climate change, water quality, biodiversity being picked up in the health check as absolutely central issues. Let's transfer that out of the field into the forest. And let's design some clever mechanisms for rewarding forest owners for those things. That's policy innovation that's needed here. Now, we give huge amounts of money, absolutely enormous amounts of money, under single farm payment to farmers. They have to meet basic good agricultural environmental condition. In fact, many of them don't, because the compliance assessment is so poor. If we could push some of those values into the forest and deliver that value under effectively a single forest payment with reasonable GEEC or GAEC obligations, good agricultural environmental condition obligations, that would reward forest owners. So we can be creative and we can be innovative, and that is what we have to get cleverer at doing, in my view. But I think the question is fair, and we're not there yet, but it's a road that we've got to move down. One last example, I read in the papers this week in Britain of what's called environmentally compensating projects. So a developer takes land and builds houses on it and damages the environment as a result of that, uses carbon and so on. What he has to do is put money into a fund that an environmental specialist organisation invests in environment. It could be forestry, it could be biodiversity, it could be informal recreational opportunity. But an expert becomes the investor into that, and that then creates a new market opportunity for them. So there are many, many arenas where these new examples and opportunities can be developed. We simply have to get more creative and wiser.
Thank you very much. We need to continue. So, you know, professors, when they start to explain, so it takes some time. Now, afternoon we will have more time for discussion and for questions. So, thank you very much, Bill, for presentation. There is a